Warning, the following program was produced for traditional broadcast television. Over 12 minutes of commercials have been removed, but interruptions are still included. Thank you for watching.
The other thing that's really important is that policies and access can change. The Canadian truckers episode was a really good example of that, where the government ordered their Bitcoin to be frozen. And if an exchange gets an order from a government to freeze Bitcoin, oftentimes they will. So this is what we mean when we say not your keys, not your coins.
Self-custody requires personal responsibility, much like freedom and sovereignty of any kind requires personal responsibility. And that those trade-offs, there are consequences if you don't learn how to do things properly, which can really, really suck for a lot of people.
Government officials insist we will continue to keep you informed as this story unfolds.
Welcome to the Money Block with Matthew J. Moore, the Bitcoin-focused program that's waking the masses to the fiat money Ponzi scheme. Money is changing, and your freedom is at stake. So stick around and learn how to empower yourself for this new digital age. Now, here's your host, Matthew J. Moore.
And so, welcome, America. Welcome, world. You are here at the right time, right place. You are tuned in to BizTV. If you're not, you're probably watching online, but we want to welcome all you Bitcoin newbies, lovers, and experts. This is a program where we come to educate the world about the things that are happening. The world is changing, and money is changing. Bitcoin is part of that, and today, we're bringing back a guest. He's not a guest now. He's a co-host for this episode. We're going to bring him on regularly because if there's one thing you'll know about me is I am not a registered investment advisor. But today our co-host is Eric Runge. He's the owner of Veritas Bitcoin Strategies. Eric, I want to kick things off because we got a strong topic to go over, especially those who might be new to this space saying, hey, I like this Bitcoin thing. I want to own it, but how do I do it? So Eric, let's talk about this. What's on the top of your head when it comes to owning Bitcoin? Because there's probably several different ways.
Innumerable ways, Matt, and it's a pleasure to be here, by the way. Always fun. There are ways to do it, and we're so new to the Bitcoin space that there are a host of unknown unknowns. Another way of saying it is that, nobody can see the back of their own head. And so there's a way to get in trouble owning Bitcoin. There's a way to make mistakes. There's a way to not make mistakes. And so I want to help people to be as safe as possible, as smart as possible. And ultimately, Bitcoin is freedom money. So educate them to make the decision that's best for them by looking at all the pros and cons, hopefully in as least biased of a way as possible.
Yeah, and we've only got about a minute or so before we have to go to break, but we're going to dive into the real meat of it because people, they need to be safe. They need to know what their options are. It's not necessarily black and white. It can be black and white, which is why I absolutely love Bitcoin, but there's also some gray areas when it comes to ownership of Bitcoin because not everybody's situation is the same, and you as a registered investment advisor know very well that everybody's investment strategies might be a little bit different.
Yeah, that's right. And I've fallen into as many holes as there are to fall into in terms of owning and buying Bitcoin myself. So my passion and help is to try to help people to not make the same mistakes that I did. Even if they don't use my firm, it really doesn't matter. How you own Bitcoin is almost as important as the fact that you own Bitcoin.
Yeah, and even though we're going to get deeper into this, I'm sure, do you have a bias one way or the other for yourself personally?
It's a bias that is shifting over time. I used to be completely self-custody, non-KYC, which means I never give up any of my info. That's shifting over time as my values change. I mature and grow. I have children. I think about legacy and family. And what used to be certain for me is not as certain in terms of how I'm going to handle and own my own personal Bitcoin.
Very well said. Yeah, I mean, again, I got into this space, the real cypherpunk, freedom money perspective, and, not your coins, or not your keys, not your coins. So, and we'll explain what that means as the episode goes on. But I do acknowledge the fact that everybody's going to be in a different place in life, especially the way that they learn and their journey to owning Bitcoin. So the simple fact that we have the option to be our own custodian, to be our own bank, that's what this is all about. But we're going to talk about some of these options, what that looks like. You guys stay tuned, stay put. We got more with my wonderful co-host on this episode, Eric Runge. You're watching The Money Block. We'll be right back after this break. What does it mean to be physically, spiritually, and financially free? The right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, these were the ideas that made America. But what happens to these ideas when America's money becomes compromised? What do you do when the very thing that you're working for day after day is fundamentally designed to enslave you? Whether it was a conspiracy or not, you won't believe what is about to happen in this country. Arm yourself today with the truth and build your life on the foundations for liberty. Rediscover freedom in the 21st century and grab a copy of my Amazon best-selling book, Foundations for Liberty. For just $11.99, you can support this radio show by finding a copy on Amazon or by going to mattjmoore.com. Again, that's mattjmoore.com. Don't wait, because freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back in action. This is segment 2 of the Money Block. And if you're new to Bitcoin, this is the place for you, the show, because we're bringing a concept about how to own Bitcoin, because there's several ways to own Bitcoin. You can definitely be your own custodian, your own bank, and hold your own keys and be sovereign over your wealth. But some people may not be very technical. And to help me and to co-host this episode, this topic is Eric Runge. He is a registered financial advisor, and he's got some qualifications that I don't have. I bring some experience and opinion, but he's got some qualifications. So, Eric, let's dive into this topic real quick. I think you've prepared some slides, and so I think these visuals will be important for people as we kind of go through this topic and the options that are available to those who want to own and invest in Bitcoin. And like I was saying during the first segment, not everybody's going to have the same life situation and the same knowledge and the same technical experience. So I'm going to give it off to you. How would you break this down if you were sitting across the table to somebody and they were the first time buyer or owner of Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so what I want to cover are 3 very popular, maybe 3 of the most popular ways to own Bitcoin: self-custody, exchange, and then an emerging category, basically, of hiring a Bitcoin advisor. Self-custody is really the most sort of cowboy, DIY, do-it-yourself approach. That's how we all did it, Matt, and I bet you did it that same way back in the day when you first started. Very OG, very orange-pilled. It also carries, in some ways, the most amount of risk because it's very risky if I take my keys and put them in, if I put them in someplace like under the bed of my pickup, and I'm the only one who knows where they're at. At the same time, it's also very safe in the sense that there is no counterparty risk. So that's just one example. And then I would like to talk about the pros and cons of each: self-custody, exchange, Bitcoin advisor. Like I said, hopefully in a way that is not biased. There's no way really to escape bias. I have my preferences, but we can even talk about that. So
yeah, I mean, again, I'm very much the OG mentality. Not your keys, not your coins per se, and that's only because I got into this space for some of those very sovereign reasons that I didn't want somebody to tell me when and where and how I could use or spend my money. But not everybody is using Bitcoin like a medium of exchange. They're using it solely as a store of value, a pure investment play, long-term holding, which of course is part of my strategy too. But I like the idea of having the option. And so I've kind of taken the mentality that most of my holdings are in my control, but there's going to be some part of my portfolio in which I probably will use custodial services down the road, and I don't have a problem with it. It's just the simple fact and truth that if I wanted to, I have the option to use Bitcoin, to move Bitcoin however I want, when I want, and if I ever had to flee, God forbid, for any political reasons, I could cross jurisdictions with information in my head, and presto, I have access to, millions of dollars if I needed to. So let's break this down, because I'm sure you share some of the same viewpoints. And, I don't say this out of disrespect, but my grandmother, my grandfather, I don't know if I'm going to feel comfortable trusting them with these private seed phrases that back up their wallets, because, a lot of people have made a bad habit of poor digital hygiene and even keeping track of information that is related to passwords or backing up digital information.
That's exactly right. That's how I feel about it as well. The principle that I'm working off of here is definitely still not your keys, not your coins. But there's also, kind of like you're hinting at, there's the ideal, and then there's when the ideal meets reality. And so for me, the ideal is self-custody. But yes, the ideal for my 70-some-odd-year-old parents is they don't want to mess with private keys. And so what happened for me was once I studied and started to understand Bitcoin, I was an idealist, like we all are when we first understand it. And then as I started implementing Bitcoin ownership with my clients, I started to realize, gosh, these people love me and they trust me, but they're just not all built to hold their own private keys, and that's okay. So it forced me to start thinking differently. And that's ultimately where I actually turned my RIA into a Bitcoin advisor. So absolutely. So if we looked at self-custody, you get maximum control. You hold your own keys. There's no third party or counterparty risk, third party custody. But it's hard. It takes a lot of study. With an exchange, it's easiest to start. The platform holds the keys. It's very quick. Could be good for traders. With a Bitcoin advisor, this is actually an emerging category. So we're sort of carving this out as we go. But I like to think of it as sort of the best of both worlds with some trade-offs, guided implementation, built-in protections, and then process and oversight, because what you're doing is hiring a pro. And you're also going to pay for it. So every single path is a trade-off between control, convenience, and protection. And we can dive a little bit deeper into all three of these options, but just know it's not either or, it's always a trade-off. That's how I try to think.
Yeah, and before I ask you this next question, I do want people to be aware that there's a place that they can go to get in contact with you if they want to hire your services and they want somebody to hold their hand through this process. Give them that website real quick.
Yeah, it's familyofficebitcoin.com. And you can actually download a free copy of my book on my website.
Yeah, it's beautiful because as you said, the industry's changing, times are evolving. When I was in the space and I had people coming to me, I was basically teaching people how to fish. I wasn't managing their money. And so people would pay me to be like, hey, teach me how to get into this and I even had investment advisors calling me and they were like, hey, I got a client that wants to get into Bitcoin. I'm going to send them your way. Well, that's changing now because now, ETFs are very prevalent, and that is another way of owning Bitcoin or exposure to Bitcoin. But what you offer, are you helping people physically buy Bitcoin, manage that Bitcoin for them, or is it just buying an ETF?
It's actually both. I'm helping them responsibly buy on-chain Bitcoin, real Bitcoin, and depending on what they want to do and who they are, help them buy ETFs, or at the end of our presentation today, I'll talk about our downside risk mitigated ETF portfolio, which is a fancy way of saying Bitcoin exposure without all the same volatility of Bitcoin.
All right, well, I'm going to hand it off to you. You got another slide here that I think we should go over.
Yeah, I think it's most important. The understanding of private keys really guides the ownership discussion. If you don't know what keys are, you won't know why I'm saying that an exchange can be very dangerous. So if we understand keys, it really helps to kind of unlock the rest of it. So a private key is anytime you own Bitcoin, you get a 12 or 24 word phrase that gives you access to your coins. So Matt, when you said before, not your keys, not your coins, that's exactly what you meant. If you have the keys, you have the coins. If you share the keys with a friend, they can move your Bitcoin without your permission. You sharing the keys is you giving your permission. So if I have all my keys, my 12 or 24 word phrase buried somewhere in my house and my house burns down and it's on a piece of paper, my Bitcoin is gone. Or if I get dementia later on and I'm the only person who knows where those keys are and now I can't remember, I become the counterparty risk. So it's really important to understand what keys are and aren't and the access that they provide for Bitcoin ownership.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to people to know that when you're holding those keys, it's the thing that's giving you permission to move that Bitcoin across the distributed ledger. And so when you have a wallet that has keys associated with it, you're not actually holding necessarily the Bitcoin in that physical device. You're protecting that key, those private keys, and that seed phrase is backing up those keys that we're talking about. So I think that people get lost in that sometimes, but I just wanted to kind of clarify that, which I know you're probably getting ready to talk about that.
No, you're handing it off perfectly, because when we talk about our keys, there's such a thing as a cold wallet and a hot wallet, and that falls under the self-custody discussion. If I have a cold wallet, it means my keys have never touched the internet. That's really important to keep hackers from getting my keys through hacking, the internet. If I have a hot wallet, my keys are exposed to the internet. And so that's something that maybe not a lot of people know about. It's important to store if you're going to have self-custody, it's important to store the majority of your Bitcoin cold. Now, maybe I have a hot wallet and I'm just going to store a small amount of Bitcoin because I want to spend it or do something else. I'm not worried about if somebody hacks it. Maybe I put $10 in there or $100 or that sort of thing. But either way, whatever decision I ultimately make, it's really important to just kind of know the difference. So when we talk about self-custody, the pros are, because I'm going to hold my keys, nobody else is going to have them, I get complete, full control, absolute, full self-sovereignty. Nobody can shut me down. Even if they make it illegal, I'm not suggesting anybody break the law, but they have to enforce, and they have to come and get my keys. They can't just force me to give up ownership of my Bitcoin.
Well, we gotta run to break, but when we come back, we're going to revisit this slide, and we're going to go more into detail. So I hate to leave you guys on the edge of your seat, but when we come back, we're going to go more into detail with self-custody. Stay tuned. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is round 3, segment 3 of the Money Block, America's Bitcoin-focused TV and radio show, syndicated on BizTV, coast to coast. So we want to welcome all of you who are tuned in on television. If you're watching online, well, give us a like, comment, share, be a part of the conversation. We want to hear directly from you. If you're new to this space and this information was helpful, let us know, because that's what we want to do when providing this wonderful Bitcoin-related content. Bitcoin is a new asset, a new form of money, something that has come to the scene over the last decade and is really changing the world. And so today, I've brought back Eric Runge. He's co-hosting this episode with me today, and he's a registered investment advisor, so he's got a couple more qualifications than I do, but he is the owner of Veritas Bitcoin Strategies, and we're talking about how to own Bitcoin. There's several ways to own Bitcoin, and I have a way that I have a bias in how I like to own it, but yet it may not be the most conducive for those who are new or maybe not tech savvy, but they want exposure to Bitcoin, and each one has its pros and cons. And so we're going to go through that, but before we do, I just want to remind you, as a thank you gift for tuning in and watching, I'm going to give away a free gift. It is my Amazon best-selling book, Foundations for Liberty. And in the second half of that book, I break down the core fundamentals of sound money, why it relates to our freedom and sovereignty. So it'll give you some good primer to these concepts and to these ideas when it comes to monetary sovereignty and Bitcoin. So go ahead and scan that QR code, download it. My way of saying thank you. So, all right. Well, Eric, I'm going to hand it off back to you. Before we went to break, you had a slide up, and we were talking about private keys and the seed phrases that back up those private keys, and some of the pros and cons to self-custody. So I want you to pick back up where we left off and explain to the viewers how this all works.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And you mentioned that sort of being tech savvy, and that's a really great point, because self-custody is traditionally for those who are and want to be the most tech savvy. It requires equipment. You have to sort of familiarize yourself with equipment. And I'm coming from the place of that's what I do. Personally, for my own Bitcoin, I like being tech savvy. It's really fun. And the developer community, the Bitcoin developer community, is actually developing easier and easier equipment for people who want to self-custody but don't want to be as tech savvy. But nevertheless, there will be a sort of minimum level of tech that you have to do. Now, with self-custody, you own your keys, and you're going to hold your keys wherever you want to hold them in whatever fashion you choose. Nobody's telling you what to do. There's no counterparty that you're signing up with. And so for that reason, there's no exchange counterparty risk. There's no Coinbase or Binance that could get in the way. You're owning Bitcoin directly, so you get full autonomy and full, complete control. The trade-offs are, like we mentioned before, if you have your Bitcoin stored on keys, written on a piece of paper, somewhere in your house, and your house burns down, your Bitcoin is gone. And so you are responsible for your full and complete security. Mistakes can be and often are permanent. You can lose your coins and they are gone unless you have a way to back those coins up. And so, and traditionally, historically, there is a learning curve. Again, that doesn't mean self-custody is bad. It doesn't mean it's good. It means it's for a certain type of person. It is really proper Bitcoin. You're full, complete, sovereignly owning your Bitcoin. And so that it's a very purist sort of idealist position. Like I say, most of my Bitcoin is in self-custody.
Yeah, and I think the thing that people have to realize is self-custody requires personal responsibility, much like freedom and sovereignty of any kind requires personal responsibility, and that those trade-offs, there are consequences if you mismanage or don't learn how to do things properly, which can really, really suck for a lot of people. And because, it's like if you lose the private seed phrase that backs up your wallet, well, there's no way of getting that money back. You've heard stories of people going through landfills trying to find these old hard drives that had this information on there because they wanted to be able to access millions of dollars. So it's beautiful that it's designed this way because it allows us to take digital scarcity, digital money that we are the controller of, that we don't need to ask for permission, and gives us this level of sovereignty in the digital world. But there are some risks. So I'm glad you're talking about the pros and cons here.
Yeah, absolutely. Bitcoin doesn't coddle you. And that's the difference between our current system where there are FDIC insured backups, there are ways to reverse a transaction, et cetera. There are none of those with Bitcoin. So if we looked at what might be considered the polar opposite of self-custody, we have exchange custody. This is, I'm going to go to Coinbase or Binance and buy Bitcoin. What I do is I give up my info. That's first and foremost, the first thing that happens is I give up my info. But it's simple. There's a convenient trade-off. It is very easy to buy and sell because all of the liquidity exists on Coinbase. So they have a stash of Bitcoin waiting for me to buy or sell. And so I can do that really, really quick. It is really good if you want to get into Bitcoin quickly and easily, and you're brand new. You don't want to mess with studying Bitcoin. It's good for starter positions. Now, the trade-off, this is one that's not often advertised, and I think this is important. The platform holds the keys. That's why we talked about keys earlier. If you got to understand what keys are, it's your 12-word phrase or your 24-word phrase, wherein if you have access to your keys, you have the coins. But if you don't have the keys, you do not have your coins. So if a platform holds the keys, they have your coins. And that's a really important thing to understand. What that means is there is significant counterparty risk with somebody like Coinbase, because what a lot of people don't know is if you actually don't own your keys, even when you have a Coinbase account, a Coinbase retail account. If Coinbase goes down, your keys go with them because they technically have ownership of those keys. You actually only have a claim on your keys, but they belong to and are owned by Coinbase. At the Coinbase institutional level, that's not the case. There are safeguards in place, but a lot of people don't know to distinguish between retail and institutional. The other thing that's really important is that policies and access can change. The Canadian truckers episode was a really good example of that, where the government ordered their Bitcoin to be frozen. And if an exchange gets an order from a government to freeze Bitcoin, oftentimes they will. So this is what we mean when we say not your keys, not your coins. Even if you wanted access to your coins and they froze it, you wouldn't have it. If you had it in self-custody, that'd be completely different.
Yeah, I think Yeah, it's important to mention that because the only way that Bitcoin can be frozen is if it's in somebody else's custody and the government can come to this office building where Coinbase or Cash App or whoever and tell them, hey, shut this down, stop this. But if you're using on-chain Bitcoin, they can't be stopped. So good distinction there. And we got about 40 seconds, so we have to go to break. So,
all right. Then what we'll do is we'll just broadly introduce the idea of a Bitcoin advisor. And then after break, we could dive in. The idea of a Bitcoin advisor is sort of an emerging category. I know at Veritas, we're building that. I'm not sure how many other Bitcoin advisors are out there. I know of a small handful, but think of it as a sort of subset of a traditional wealth manager or financial advisor where we as Bitcoin advisors really like Bitcoin and we like to talk about it. This is, for me, all I really want to do and talk about. And so I've focused my business on the specialty. So think of it like a GP, general practitioner, versus a shoulder specialist.
Well,
that's how I like to think about that.
When we come back, we're going to go deeper into Bitcoin advisors. Glad you're here with me because Eric is the man for the job. All right, we'll be right back. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Round 4, segment 4 of the Money Block. America's Bitcoin-focused TV and radio show, syndicated on BizTV. We want to thank you for joining us. You could be doing a lot of different things, but today you have chosen to learn a thing or two about Bitcoin because that's what this show is all about. We want to talk about sound money, freedom, liberty, sovereignty. How does it all relate to our personal finances? Well, today we're talking about the how to buy Bitcoin because there's several ways to buy Bitcoin. And I brought on a co-host to help us navigate this, go through this. He's a registered investment advisor. He's a returning guest as well, Eric Runge. But before I have him continue his slide presentation and continue our wonderful conversation, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in and learning because, like I said, you could be doing a lot of different things. But to say thank you, here is a free download of my Amazon best-selling book, Foundations for Liberty. If you scan that QR code, you'll receive a free copy. That the second half of that book will give you a good primer about monetary sovereignty, sound money, why it relates to Bitcoin and the topic today. So feel free to download that. But Eric, let's pick it up here. When we went to break, you had a slide up and you were getting ready to talk about Bitcoin advisors, which is exactly what you do. In fact, dive into this. Like, what does a Bitcoin advisor do?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So I've been so think of a financial advisor or a wealth manager, and they're going to, in a mostly commoditized market, we are going to offer you, the S&P 500 or a 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Or if we work in the family office space or the high net worth space, maybe we're working in a private credit or some very specialized asset class. Generally speaking, it's a commoditized space, meaning that there are way more advisors than there are clients. But in the space that I focus on and work in, it's best to think of it like you've got a doctor, you've got your general practitioner, and he's going to be really good at just a sort of broad look at your whole self and keep your general health up to speed, up to date. But then you've got a shoulder surgeon or a foot surgeon, and they have spent their whole careers focusing on that area of specialty. That's the best way to think of a Bitcoin advisor. It's a unique asset class that requires hundreds of hours of study to really become an expert at it. So think of a Bitcoin advisor as a deeply specialized advisor as a subset of a general wealth manager or financial advisor. At least that's how my firm functions. Now, there might be other Bitcoin advisors that come to it from a completely different angle, but that's how my firm functions.
So if I'm hearing you right, if somebody's like, hey, I want somebody to hold my hand and teach me the different ways of buying, holding, investing into Bitcoin, you can help them with that. But and they would go to your website, right? FamilyOfficeBitcoin.com. That's a place where they could probably find you. But could they also come to you with other parts of their portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. We have public market strategies, the 60-40 portfolio, but we do it differently. So my investment management team has developed their own proprietary risk managed software that receives 10,000 risk signals a day And so our goal is always, so with your 401k, your IRA, the goal is always to achieve superior returns by avoiding large drawdowns. We don't swing for the fences and look for the latest, greatest investment. We're always looking to sort of sidestep where the largest areas of downside volatility exist. We also have an AI hedge fund. Now, these are not this is not my firm's focus, but I outsource it to my investment management team, who then also focuses on their areas of specialty. So yeah, that's a really long way of saying, absolutely, we don't just do Bitcoin, but what I want to do is talk about Bitcoin all day, every day to people, and then provide the services that are sort of full spectrum in the sort of traditional financial advisory space.
Yeah, I just thought I'd ask because I know some people are probably thinking that. So, but yeah, let's dive into this Bitcoin Advisor. What else do you got on this slide for us?
Yeah, if we look at a Bitcoin Advisor, at least how Veritas functions, there are really two services that we offer. Now, the big service is education, like what we're doing today, because if people are going to buy Bitcoin, they need to understand what they're holding. So I make all my clients watch my Bitcoin 101 presentation, which is about 45 minutes, and I personally walk them through a webinar that I built to help them really understand what they're holding. That's the education side. But from a product side of things, in terms of holding Bitcoin, on the left, you can see on-chain 2 of 3 multi-sig. Okay, so on-chain just means that you're holding real Bitcoin on the blockchain. 2 of 3 multi-sig means that instead of one private key, one 12-word phrase, seed phrase, you have 3 seed phrases, and any 2 of those 3 keys are needed to move the funds. And so that creates redundancy. There's no single point of failure. If one key gets lost, we still have 2. That also means that if a person holds me up in an alley or knows that I have X amount of money on Bitcoin and wants to rob me, they can't just come and hold up my Bitcoin and get it and run away, because rest of my Bitcoin might be, the other keys might be stored at my attorney's office or in a safety deposit box. So that's the point of 2 of 3 multi-sig. It eliminates that single point of failure.
And a lot of people will probably do that with significant amount of wealth invested into Bitcoin, correct?
That's right. And it's just it's the same concept of diversification. We just diversify our access and even diversify our exposure to Bitcoin. So that's why on the right, you can see a downside risk mitigated approach, which we'll circle back to. But to your point, absolutely, diversification is still very much at play.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
What's next on your agenda here?
Yeah. So if we look at why some investors choose the path of a Bitcoin advisor, think of it as the convenience of a Coinbase, although honestly not quite as convenient, but very convenient still, with turnkey implementations, and then potentially even more security. It depends on how you define your security. Definitely more security than an exchange, but potentially more security than self-custody. And that depends, again, on how you want to set up your own self-custody. So it's a hybrid. But the trade-offs are you're going to pay for service. You get what you pay for, so advisory fees. And then if we just consider the category of Bitcoin advisor, provider quality matters. Usually Bitcoiners are a well-studied, very good bunch. If you're going to put 1,500 hours of study into something, you're probably going to be honest. And it's less DIY than self-custody. For some people, that's a good thing. For others, it's a bad thing. So a Bitcoin advisor is somebody who wants a turnkey, familiar wrapper, advisory relationship. They don't want to just hold their own Bitcoin. They want to go shoulder to shoulder with somebody who will advise them through the ups and downs, changes in the market, changes in structure. It's exchange-like convenience with self-custody style security. And then I'll circle back to our downside risk mitigated approach after this, but that's kind of the general overview of a good Bitcoin advisor.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that hiring somebody like Eric is a good thing to do. And as you go through your Bitcoin journey and you learn, and maybe you've opened up an exchange account, maybe you bought on Cash App or Coinbase, and now you're experimenting moving small amounts of that to a self-custodial wallet, just so you learn how it works, and so you can say that I have officially gone through the initiation of being my own custodian. But for large amounts of money that you might be nervous about, like, man, I don't know if I want hundreds of thousands or if millions of dollars stored under my mattress per se, for lack of better terms. Hiring somebody like Eric is probably the way to go.
And for somebody like, let's say, a family office who's a very specialized type of entity, and for some family offices, $100 million in Bitcoin is literally, a drop in the bucket. Not literally, but strongly figuratively.
Right.
But even then, they still might not want to hold $100 million on Coinbase or, in their house with a single seed phrase. And so a Bitcoin advisor could be helpful. A better self-custody setup can be helpful. And that takes us into 2 of 3 multi-sig. So I would like to dive a little bit deeper into what that's like.
Yeah, we got about a minute. So we'll have to, when we come back from break, we may be able to touch on a little bit more. But go ahead and start us off.
Yeah, we'll just take kind of an overview. So really, it's 2 of 3 keys are required to move funds. And so for somebody like a high net worth investor or a family office entity, they don't want a single point of failure. They don't want somebody to have incentive to break into their house and hold a gun to their head and say, give me all your Bitcoin. They want to be able to say, hey, I'd love to, but I can't because my key is in Brazil and my other key is with my attorney in New York, and here I am in Chicago. So we want to create incentive structures that prevent what we call a $5 wrench attack. So I'd say that's a good overview of 2 or 3 multi-sig.
Yeah, very well said. And like I said, everybody's in a different place, a different point in their Bitcoin journey. And if you go to Eric's website, familyofficebitcoin.com, you can learn more about what Eric offers, what's all entailed. Highly recommend you go to his website and check it out. But guys, we gotta go to break. But don't forget about that QR code that's right there. My free gift, my Amazon best-selling book. Just want to say thank you for joining us, for tuning in. It'll prime you with some of these ideas around monetary sovereignty, sound money. But until we're going to come back and we're going to continue and finish this up with Eric, because we got our last segment, but it's going to be good. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. AI is here, money is changing, but freedom has never been more important. I'm Matthew J. Moore, the Money Block host on BizTV, Amazon bestseller, and Bitcoin policy advisor. Book my up to 60-minute talk, Redefining Wealth and Freedom God's Way. I'll teach your church, business, or civic group how to secure money, freedom, and faith in the digital age. This is urgent, so I'm slashing my fee from $1,000 to $500. Cover my travel, and I'm there. Scan the QR code now. Spots are filling fast. What does it mean to be physically, spiritually, and financially free? The right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, these were the ideas that made America. But what happens to these ideas when America's money becomes compromised? What do you do when the very thing that you're working for day after day is fundamentally designed to enslave you? Whether it was a conspiracy or not, you won't believe what is about to happen in this country. Arm yourself today with the truth and build your life on the foundations for liberty. Rediscover freedom in the 21st century and grab a copy of my Amazon best-selling book, Foundations for Liberty. For just $11.99, you can support this radio show by finding a copy on Amazon or by going to mattjmoore.com. Again, that's mattjmoore.com. Don't wait, because freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is segment 5, round 5, the final segment of the Money Block. You're tuned in to America's Bitcoin-focused TV and radio show, syndicated on BizTV. Yep, that's right, traditional media, but we're also online. So if you're watching online, give us a like, comment, subscribe, be a part of that conversation. Today is a great topic for those who might be new to Bitcoin. We're talking about the different ways of buying, holding, investing into Bitcoin, and we may have our biases, but not, one way is not a solution for everybody. and everybody's on a different point in their journey as far as even technical knowledge. And so I brought on a co-host for this episode, Eric Runge, the owner of Veritas Bitcoin Strategies. He's been going through his presentation with us, and he's a registered investment advisor. So he works with all types of people, but he's worked with a lot of high net worth individual as well. So Eric, I'm going to hand it back off to you. We were talking about what a Bitcoin advisor is and does. So take it from here, buddy.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah. So what I am trying to build and am building with Veritas is the category of a Bitcoin advisor. So if you think of traditional wealth manager, some specialize in dentists, some specialize in just business owners or high net worth people. I focus on high net worth people and family offices, but also, and that's my client type, but also Bitcoin as a very narrow domain of expertise. And that's because I'm built to discuss Bitcoin. That's my calling and desire, and that's what I want to do. So through Veritas, we've been talking today about ways to own Bitcoin, self-custody, exchange, and then through a Bitcoin advisor. We talked about the on-chain 2 of 3 multi-sig approach through Veritas, and I want to get even further sort of into the weeds with the downside risk mitigated approach, which is a fancy way of saying Bitcoin exposure without all of the risk. So all of the volatility risk. Now, so what do I mean? When you own on-chain Bitcoin, you're not exposed to Bitcoin, but you are owning Bitcoin. If you have so 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. So you get access to the price action of Bitcoin because you own the Bitcoin. With that comes full upside, full downside, no volatility dampening, direct Bitcoin exposure. That's the exact same thing if you own a Bitcoin ETF like IBIT or FBTC, any of the Bitcoin ETFs. But the key difference is you don't actually own Bitcoin. You're exposed to the price action of Bitcoin, and you have all the same risks, but you don't actually own the Bitcoin. Again, not good nor bad. It's just important to know. So with on-chain Bitcoin, full volatility. But what I realized at some point was that certain investors don't want all that volatility. Some of them can't actually tolerate it according to their own investment policy statement that their board, that their investment committee put together. So it's a matter of maybe they love Bitcoin, but they don't want the volatility, or just like a pension fund would not adopt Bitcoin because they simply do not want that level of volatility. They're forbidden from it, is my point. So what I did was build a downside risk mitigated approach where we basically have historically so far cut about 75% of the volatility out of Bitcoin. So in other words, if Bitcoin goes up 100%, our portfolios would likely go up around 25%, or they're designed to go up around 25%. If Bitcoin drops by 100%, which would be Bitcoin dropping to zero, but theoretically, our portfolios are designed to only drop by 25%. So that's a much more dampened position while still gaining price action access to Bitcoin. Now, you're not owning Bitcoin, you're owning ETFs. Some people care about that, some people don't. But that's the upside and downside to downside risk mitigated Bitcoin that we're pioneering.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, if they go to a traditional advisor, you're offering more than what maybe a traditional advisor may offer. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The way we like to approach it is we take traditional strategies and kick them up a notch. So our 60/40 portfolios are highly risk managed with some very customized, specialized software. We also have an AI hedge fund that has a lot of downside risk mitigation built into it as well, that seeks to beat the NASDAQ, as well as Bitcoin strategies. So I don't like the commoditized wealth management space where everybody is just competing, trying to offer you their S&P 500 fund or their 60/40. I really wanted to build the firm different, and so far we have.
I like that, and if you want to learn more about what Eric is doing, you can go to familyofficebitcoin.com. And I know he's got some books that we're going to bring up and discuss, but Eric, I'll let you take the lead on where we go next.
Yeah, so really what I have developed myself and my business into is the bridge for people from zero to Bitcoin. I have a history. My education is in is in teaching. And so pedagogy became really important, and that burned its way into my psyche and how I think. So what I realized was that a lot of people are interested in Bitcoin. A lot of family offices and high net worth people are interested in Bitcoin, but they don't even know where to begin. And I realized that, hey, I'm the bridge for that. That's what I built to do. That's what I like doing. I love helping people with their unknown unknowns. So the book Over My Right Shoulder is my first book written for family offices, although it's appropriate for any investor who wants to learn about Bitcoin. But essentially, it's a strategic introduction, an intelligent introduction for those who want a sort of low pressure way to just study Bitcoin and learn about it. It'll really get your feet wet. There's hundreds or thousands of hours of study that people could be putting into Bitcoin. But really, this was designed to be a concise way to get a hold of the topic in a very accessible, sort of dynamic and really interesting way that helps you feel like, hey, maybe I can invest in this thing. Or maybe I have enough info now to where I don't want to touch the asset class and I'll never invest in it.
Yeah, well, we got about 40 seconds left. You have another book, though, that you are getting ready to release.
I do. Just released. Yeah, it's called The Cost of Consensus. It's very Bitcoin related, but this is more about human relationships and decision-making under pressure. The main character, he knows what he thinks about Bitcoin, but he cannot bring himself to say it in a way to his investment committee that sticks. And he gives inside of himself and he hates it. And so it's about his journey and how he's looking at decision-making and preserving the legacy that his father left him.
I love it. Well, again, I'm going to give your website, familyofficebitcoin.com. Highly suggest you guys check out Eric and grab his books, do some reading. And if we tried to boil it down in this episode, but if you're still kind of confused and saying, hey, I got to learn some basic concepts still, don't worry. This is a process. Keep watching the show, read his books, read mine. It'll get you going. All right, guys, we'll see you. Same time, same place. Adios.
The opinions and suggestions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants and are not necessarily endorsed by program sponsors or any station, media company, or platform broadcasting this program. This program is a product of More Media, LLC. The information in this broadcast is not intended as investment, tax, or financial advice. Matthew Moore is not a licensed investment advisor and speaks solely from his experience and opinions. All information in this broadcast is for entertainment or educational purposes only. Matthew Moore, More Media, LLC, and the company or platform broadcasting this program is not responsible for the success or failure of any person's investment decisions or purchases. Matthew Moore, More Media, LLC, and the company or platform broadcasting this program makes no and expressly disclaims all representations, warranties, and guarantees with respect to this broadcast and its sponsors. Investing in any market is inherently risky and can be financially dangerous. Invest at your own risk.